Are you ready to perform at your highest potential? Thank you for joining this GP Strategies webinar, where we'll explore best practices and innovative insights to help you and your organization improve performance.
Hi everyone, and a good day to you wherever you're joining us from. We're really glad that you've joined us for this webinar, Box Ticking versus Lasting Impacts, right? Where we're going to find out if we're doing enough with learning in our organizations. My name's Tim. I'm the Engagement and Partnerships Lead from GP Strategies Singapore. We might have connected before, and I'd love to connect with you again after this webinar, of course. But on to, the most important thing. Our speaker for today is Ben. Ben Kia leads GP Strategies operations in Australia and Southeast Asia, bringing over 2 decades of experience across the Asia Pacific region. He specializes in modern learning transformation and leadership development, and he's an expert in bridging learning, science, and technology to craft genuine learning impact, which is, some of the things that we'll be going through today, together with engagement for learners. So without further ado, over to you, Ben.
Thank you, Tim. I am just going to start sharing my screen now. Do that. All right, so hopefully you guys can all see my screen now. It's lovely to see. I can see some familiar names in the participant list today. So yeah, very happy to be here. So I do know that me coming up with a title called Box Ticking versus Lasting Impact is a little bit provocative in that it implies that sometimes we are delivering learning in a way that is a box ticking exercise. Sorry, I've just realized my video is off, so I'm going to turn on my video so you guys can see me. But the reality is, if we're operating in L&D, sometimes, as much as we don't want it to be, especially if we're, career L&D practitioners, we do not want learning to be a box ticking exercise, but sometimes it does become that for a whole range of reasons. Sometimes the KPIs, our KPIs within the learning teams or within HR can drive box ticking behavior. I know many of our customers have metrics and KPIs relating to their annual performance reviews and remuneration, incentives and bonuses and so on, related to, number of hours completed, number of trainings attended, number of trainings completed, things like that. And so this can drive some box ticking behavior. But the other thing is, for a long time, learning has been hard to measure, and it's been hard to actually truly know if we're designing learning that has a genuine impact on our learners. And so that's really what we want to talk about today, and specifically in the context of, micro learning and learning that's emerged. How do we make the move from, just moving through the motions of learning to actually leveraging the knowledge and the science and the tools that are out there to create real lasting impact with our learning? So the event is being recorded. We will be sharing the recording with anyone who's registered and also those who have attended. So you'll see that in the email. I do want to also point out from time to time, I'll be using the chat. And so if everyone could open the chat right now and make sure you've selected to everyone, right? Not just to the hosts and the panelists, but to everyone. And just tell me, where in the world are you? Tell me, where in the world are you? Which city? I'll do that. I'm in Sydney, Australia. Okay, I can see we got Singapore, we got Malaysia, we got a whole bunch of people from Singapore, Tokyo, Japan, wonderful, India, Shanghai. Shanghai to my Shanghai colleagues. We've got some folks in Brisbane. Kathleen's in the Philippines. All right, cool. Kelly's in Australia somewhere. Okay, cool. So, someone in Victoria, Mark, welcome. So really great to see you guys. You found the chat. We'll be using that from time to time. I'm going to say, tell me in the chat. The other tool we'll be using throughout is Mentimeter. And so I'm going to get us onto Mentimeter right now. I've got a QR code there. If you could register, with your mobile phone, or if you're not using your mobile phone, you can open another browser window and go to menti.com and enter that code. But once you've done that, give me a thumbs up so I can see that we're all on there. If you could give me click the thumbs up for me, then I'll know that you guys are on Menti. We've got a couple of thumbs up. Also, I feel like I'm kind of doing, social media, like streaming. I feel like I'm a streamer, so it makes me feel really good. Great for my ego when I see those thumbs going up. But I'll leave it up for just a little bit longer because straight away we're going into our first Menti interaction. So I want to see that number get up into the 30s if I can. 6, 7, slowly getting up there, 11, 12. Because I do have a couple of interactions in here where I really do want to hear from you and get your perception on certain topics and certain concepts. So 14, still waiting for it to go up a little bit higher. Let's make sure that you're on Menti. I'm seeing a thumbs up also in the chat. Thank you, Ashish. 15, 16. All right. Now, remember, when I change screen, even if you've missed the QR code, you can always go to menti.com and enter that code. It'll be visible on every single Menti. So let's go into our very first question. And our first question today is, what is the primary goal of learning? Have a think about it. I'm about to open the Menti in a second. What are we really trying to achieve primarily when we are delivering learning? What do we want out of it? What are the goals? And I'm just going to open up that Menti for us. Oh, sorry. Apologies. Here we go. So I think you can leave up to 2 or 3 responses in here. So if you really want to do more than one goal, you can. What is the primary goal of learning? Growth, behavior change. I'm seeing some lovely words come in. To change someone's understanding of something. I love that. That's really cool. Upskilling, education. So the person who wrote education, what's the goal of education? Let's see. Growth is still the biggest ticket word. Change is the second biggest word, I'd say. Behavior change and change. Upskilling. Performance. Here we're starting to get into some end game outcomes, some level 4 Kirkpatrick scale stuff. Results, performance, business improvement. Yeah, I think this is right. But ultimately, I think what we want to see is, a change. And we want that change to lead to some sort of results. And so this is why discussing box ticking versus learning for impact is so relevant and important, because I don't think learning is the goal. Learning is the first step. What we want from learning is retention and transfer. The way we get success, the way we get business results, the way we get behavior change is that they've retained that learning and that they have transferred that knowledge onto the job. That's really the main goal. If I was to just simplify it into 2 words, retention and transfer. Once I achieve retention and transfer, I get all the other stuff that you guys wrote on this page here. You get growth, you get behavior change, you get business improvement, you get all of these things that you've listed. But if you do not achieve retention and transfer, then you're almost completely unlikely to get any of those results. Without retention and transfer, there can be no behavior change. There can be no results. So let's keep this in mind. This is our goal, retention and transfer. Irrespective of what I say from this point in our webinar, if I end it right now, we can hopefully all agree that this is what we're striving for. So what's our agenda today? Well, normally I'd give you an agenda. Today, I want to actually give you in advance what are the key lessons that we're going to be kind of covering today. And so there are really 5 key lessons, and we're going to go through them, right? First of all, there is science that supports a different approach to learning. What we're going to talk about today is I want you to know that the science supports it, and I'm going to give you what that science is. The other key lesson is that when we're operating in the world of L&D, if we're going to take advantage of what the science says, we need to be very careful in choosing the right blend of modalities. We have to be very intentional about it. And when we're choosing the modalities, we have to also be very careful about what technology we use. We have to make very smart and careful decisions about how technology can support us to meet retention, to meet transfer. If we're going to blend modalities, we're going to deploy the science, we're going to pick different technologies, we need to actually have different mindsets. If we're going to have new approaches, we need new mindsets. And finally, a big shift in focus is that we move from, say, a content focus or a learning focus to an engagement focus. In the world of achieving the first 4 key lessons, the big outcome lesson is that our focus and priority shifts on engagement. So let's break down how we're going to actually unlock these lessons, starting with what the science says. So I like to always start my webinars, for those of you who've been on them in the past, just hitting the big why. Why am I running so many of these webinars over the last few years? And that's because it's necessary. You know, this is data from the World Economic Forum Future of Jobs report in 2023. And what they've been saying, and this is data that's been in multiple reports from different government bodies as well as private bodies like Deloitte and EY, 25% of jobs are going to be negatively impacted by AI disruption, digital disruption, automation, digitization in the next 5 years. And this is already in process. There's already been a lot of jobs impacted by automation and other factors. So this is in flow. And by the way, they're looking at 2% of the global workforce of current global employment, 14 million jobs disappearing as a result of these big disruptors, and especially AI is the biggest and newest one. The good news is, though, new skills and jobs are still likely to emerge. So even though some jobs are going away, some very task and process-oriented jobs will be going, and now we're even seeing some creative jobs being affected through AI, not being taken away, but being augmented, design and image creation, coding. But new skills are emerging to replace a lot of those that are lost. So instead of doing the task, I'm now managing the algorithm that's doing the task. Or now I'm managing the people who are managing the system or the process or the technology. So new things are going to emerge. And some of the most important skills in the future of work over the next 5 years are going to be skills such as creativity, problem solving, curiosity, agility, resilience, motivation, and self-awareness. Why is that? Well, once the technical aspects of our job get automated or get supported by AI or whatever it may be, what's left is solving big problems. What's left is improving. What's left is leading people and collaboration. So far, technology isn't doing that. So what I can see here is that we're in a world of disruption. And where this becomes really relevant in the case of box ticking versus learning for impact, half of workers reported having adequate access to training in the face of all of this disruption. Now, I don't blame L&D organizations or anything like that. It's totally expected. Some of my customers, I've got one customer who's got about 30,000 staff, and their central L&D team has like 8 people for 30,000 workers, right? And that's because the paradigm of learning for decades has been, we have a limited learning budget, and that learning budget's going to go to our hypos. It's going to go to our onboarding training. It's going to go into our systems training and our technical training and product training. And maybe a percentage will go into, solving performance issues and our new leaders, right? It's all been very targeted. But in a world of disruption and change, we need to ensure that not just that learning is happening, that it's happening all the time, that employees are empowered to learn consistently, and that it's effective. It can't just be box ticking. Otherwise, my workforce won't be ready for the changes. They won't learn those skills because there's no retention and transfer. And so, this data points to a challenge. Or is it an opportunity? One of the points that I would like to make in the next little section of my presentation here is that I see this as a massive opportunity. Yeah, it is a big challenge, but I think it's a great opportunity for us to look at learning in a new and interesting way and change the way we've been doing things. So to create a little, not a case study, but to explore through a certain lens, I'm going to ask you my next Menti question. I want you to think of leadership training, right? So, I've got my new leaders, or I've got my senior leaders. I want them to learn change management, or I want them to learn critical leadership skills like giving feedback and delegation. This is what I've got ahead of me, and I'm trying to make a decision. I want you to think about, in a traditional environment, going back in the last 5, 10, 15, 20 years, how has leadership training typically been delivered? Has it been via e-learning, via live training, or via micro-learning? How have we traditionally delivered leadership training? Yeah, 100%. In fact, if maybe we might do a bit of a blend and put e-learning to support it, or some online assessment to support it, or maybe a little bit of micro-learning to support it. But the reality is, most of our approach to leadership training has been in the classroom. And in fact, when I'm having conversations with my customers, a common refrain I hear is, and it's often a feeling, right? Oh, XYZ leader feels like we need to get back into the classroom. XYZ leader feels like it's not going to be effective if we don't do it in the classroom. There's a lot of feelings in there. And so what I want to do is, let's remember this. We've all agreed here that for something like leadership training, of which, remember, going back to the data, is a critical future skill, right? Soft skills, communication skills, very important, but very difficult to train, right? Because it's a behavior change, it's a mindset change. It's one of the more difficult things to do in a corporate learning context. What we've all agreed is that traditionally we've been doing it in a classroom. Okay, well, let's break that down by looking at moving into that science piece. And I'm going to cover a few facts of the way that the future of learning is trending, and the different learning science factors that are influencing that. So the first one I want to bring up is cognitive overload. So cognitive overload, can anyone try to tell me in the chat and tell me what's the problem here? What are we talking about when we talk about learning? What's the problem with cognitive overload? What are we trying to say about cognitive overload in learning? Someone tell me in the chat. I'm looking at the chat right now. Okay, we've got overstimulation. That was very quick, by the way. Well done. That's 10 extra points for being too much incoming information. Thank you, Nina. Yeah, we're talking about the fact, here we go, trying to fit too much content into a small amount of time. Yeah, we're talking about the fact that the mind is like a teacup, not a very big teacup as well. And basically, when we're learning, it's effectively new sensory experiences, right? And Mark's given an example of it, right? And when the brain is effectively a sorting machine, the brain is going to take all new sensory experiences, whether it's a car accident, something a child says to you, or something you learn, it's still, for the brain, a new sensory experience. And your brain is going to say, does this matter to me? Is this important? If so, it's going to stop. And they're the arrows that have stopped in the brain. It's going to sit in my short-term memory, right? Or my working memory. And anything else that the brain either can't sort, can't find a category for, doesn't deem relevant, it's just going to go straight through, right? And what happens is that working memory is actually super limited, right? It only so much actually sits in the brain. And once that working memory is full, cognitive overload. So this is a really big issue for us here, in that it's happening right now on this call, right? Or the teacups are getting filled up, right? Trying to remember all the concepts, but it happens in our learning environment too. So that's number one. The second one is the forget curve. So the forget curve is pretty famous. I've just got here, we've got memory retention on the left, and then down the bottom axis, we've got over time. How long, just tell me in the chat, does it take to get from 100% to 60% retention? Let's say I've been in a training on Monday. How long to get to 60%? Okay, we've got one guess here of 1 week. We've got 20 minutes from Ash. 48 hours, 1 week. Yeah, I mean, we're talking like less than 24 hours to get to 60% retention. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think we're in the right thing. 20 minutes, yeah, for me, in some days, yeah, 20 minutes is for real, right? And that's actually cognitive overload. When Asha said 20 minutes, that's actually very real. The more our brain is filled up, the increasing steepness of the curve. The curve increases in steepness, sorry. And then 90%, we're talking about a week, right? 90% lost in about a week's time. So the forget curve is very real, and it's a big problem. And so ideally what we want, instead of the forget curve, is we want to accept that there's a forget curve, but design learning in a way that acknowledges it through, repeating things, through spacing things over time, and we can combat the forget curve. So we've done cognitive overload. We've done the forget curve. The next piece I want to talk about is the importance of urgency and relevance. Now, what we know and what the science says about adult learning is that adults only learn. They choose to learn is a better word. Adults choose to learn when something is both urgent, i.e. immediately applicable, and it's immediately relevant. If it is not urgent and relevant, you can get someone into a classroom training. You can get someone to sign up for something. But if it is not urgent and relevant, both in terms of any form of learning, it will not be retained. People will not pay attention. And if they know in advance it's not urgent or relevant, they will not sign up, right? This is one of the few learning theories that is generally agreed across all the different domain leaders of adult learning theory, right? That's the one piece. So urgency and relevance is another key element of learning that we need to understand. Another interesting one is that we learn better together. This is called constructivist learning theory, social constructivist learning theory, which is that we learn better socially and also when we have the chance to construct that learning ourselves rather than just being told. I think I saw Mark talk about, page full of words. If you just hit someone with lots of information and inspect them just to be able to not just remember it, but to discern meaning from it, it might be a bridge too far. And so we can overcome that issue by having it become a social experience, but also designing the learning in a way that a learner can construct it and put the pieces together themselves. This helps increase retention and transfer. The other piece is we learn better when it's in the flow of work. This is our final element here. And so I might learn something in a classroom, or I might learn something on a YouTube video or whatever it may be. But actually, the real learning happens when I apply it, when I practice it. This is going from retention to actually transferring that learning into a novel environment or just my standard work environment, right? So these are the main elements we're striving for here. And all of these are supported by the science of learning. Adult learning theory backs it up. Constructivist learning theory backs it up. Cognitive load theory backs it up. And there's one element of design that everyone agrees with, is that learning that is spaced over time and repetitive also helps. There are good ways to do that and bad ways to do that. But if we all hopefully can agree that there's different ways, different facts of the brain and different facts of the way that adults learn, we then need to look at the different modalities of learning that are available to us with a critical eye. Remember I said before, that client who said to me, oh, so-and-so feels like, we need to do it in a classroom, and maybe they're right, maybe they're wrong. But actually, there's a very easy way to measure different modalities of learning. So all these images here, these icons represent a different modality, right? So you've got in-person training, classroom training, on-the-job training. What I want to do is I'm going to actually bring up a few modalities on Menti, and I want you to rank. I want you to rank for me what's most effective. So avoiding cognitive overload. I'd like you to rank which is most effective at avoiding cognitive overload from first to least effective at avoiding cognitive overload. Put them in order and then submit. So these are some common modalities we have in our workplace. Classroom training, SCORM, like e-learning packages, spaced microlearning, and you've got a MOOC library, like LinkedIn Learning. Okay, you've got some more responses coming in. Okay, so maybe I'm hungry, guys. Spaced microlearning is definitely number one. I would actually challenge what's coming in at number two. And I would suggest that classroom training is actually the least effective, or second least, maybe depending on how poorly or effectively the SCORM and the MOOC library is designed, right? But classroom training can tend to be the most ineffective at avoiding cognitive overload because classroom training typically happens over 1 day or 2 days or multiple days, right? And so we're having a consistent block of learning over a long period of time where I don't have time to pause, to reflect, to apply. It's just, hey, in the morning, let's do this module on giving feedback. Hey, in the afternoon, let's talk about delegation. And then the next day, let's talk about goal setting. Oh, and then in the afternoon, we'll talk about, creating team vision and mission statements. You've hit them with so much learning in that 1 or 2 day training that by the time they get back to work, they've forgotten what happened, right? So all of them can be effective if designed well, but traditionally, classroom training is one of the most egregious abuses of cognitive overload. So let's go to the next one. Creating social learning from best to worst, which is most effective to least effective. Creating social learning. Okay, we got some responses coming in. Some of these are trick questions, right? Because some of them are equally good or equally bad. But in this case, already I can see where the trend is going. I would agree that classroom training of these ones listed here is probably the best, at least traditionally, at creating a social learning environment because, hey, we're in a classroom, we're social, we're sitting around a table. Spaced micro-learning, well, it depends. Are you designing 10 micro-learning SCORM packages and putting them on your SuccessFactors LMS, putting them into a learning path and going, ta-da? Well, no. There's zero social learning in that, right? But if I'm using an LXP that's built around micro-learning and engagement and has chat and social features, then yeah, maybe spaced micro-learning can be a very collaborative tool. Let's talk about MOOCs. Right? MOOC libraries. So we're talking about massive open online courses like LinkedIn Learning. Not very effective, not very social outside of the ability to potentially like and share, some learning. And then SCORM e-learning, traditionally not social at all because it's limited, not so much at the SCORM layer, but limited within the LMS that it's being housed in. Let's go to this next one. Overcoming the forget curve. Which can be most effective to least effective at overcoming the forget curve? Okay, we got some responses coming in. I'll give it a minute before I start commenting. Yep, spaced micro-learning, SCORM e-learning can, if you design it right. All of these actually can be effective, but traditionally in the way we often use them in our companies today, I would suggest that your data is on point here, right? Spaced micro-learning should, if designed well, be effective at overcoming the forget curve because A, I'm chunking it to deal with cognitive overload, and B, I'm spacing it, potentially repeating it over time to further overcome the forget curve. Then we've got SCORM and MOOC and LinkedIn Learning, possibly. And after we move out of the sciences section of this webinar, I'll talk about the factors that lead to this being effective or ineffective. But generally speaking, a lot of ways SCORM e-learning is used is not done very well to overcome the forget curve. It's normally a one and done. Hey, my bank has launched a whole new, anti-money laundering training, volume 9. It's a 45-minute e-learning. I've done it, and then I don't look at it again for 6 more months until the next refresher comes out, right? Not super effective with the forget curve. And MOOCs are interesting in that, like if you looked at LinkedIn Learning, many courses are broken into chunks. So they do try to microtize it, right? Watch video 1, watch video 2, watch video 3 about presentation skills. But there's reasons why it's not so effective at overcoming the forget curve beyond just that it's chunked. There's more to overcoming the forget curve than just chunking learning. And that's what we'll come to later. And yeah, classroom training suffers the most at this because once the event ends, there are often lack of tools. And even if I do give people action plans or job aids, what's driving them to look at it and to use it, right? And so that's why classroom training, I would agree, is at the bottom of the list here. Creating relevance. This is probably my trickiest one. Which of these is best at most likely at creating really big, good relevance? Did I say big, good? Great relevance for learners. What do you guys think? Interesting results so far. The answers here are going to very much depend on your work environment, what you guys are doing in your L&D organizations, or if you're a consultant, how you're supporting your customers. Yeah, so interestingly, let's say spaced micro-learning and SCORM e-learning and MOOC learning, they're all digital. So traditionally, digital learning is least effective at creating relevance because it's one to many. All right. And classroom training is often perceived as being the most relevant, most opportunity to create relevance because I've got a live trainer. They can answer questions. They can respond to what's happening in the environment, right? In the moment where the learning is occurring. But again, what I'm going to come back to later on when we look at these different design principles we're going to cover is that it's not what modality you use, although that is definitely relevant as we can see here. It's also how is it being used? And so here's the last one, engaging learners, which is most effective at keeping learners engaged. Go ahead. This is our last one. Wait a second for some responses to come up. Okay, so I can see here that we've got classroom training coming up at number 1. We've got quite a few responses here, which is good. Okay. Yeah, so that is often the view that I see, is that classroom training is best at engaging learners because I've got a trainer there, people are participating, spaced micro learning. Again, depending on what learning platforms you've had experience with, they can be amazing or they can be terrible, right? It's about how you use the tools. And yeah, I would agree that actually the LinkedIn Learning famously, even within our own organization, has sub 10% utilization, right? So, and meaning learners who are going in at least once a week is below 10% of our entire company, and those numbers get a lot worse in some of our other clients that we've researched on this. So if I come back to our earlier question about how is leadership training being delivered traditionally, and we all said classroom. Well, hold on a minute. There's a bit of a problem here, right? Because we have just said that classroom is effective in some ways and not effective in others. But what we want out of learning is we want retention and transfer. So if we want retention and transfer and we're only relying on classroom training to deliver that, then, and we know that classroom training has a lot of issues, especially around cognitive overload, around learning in the flow of work, it's not ideal, or at least not ideal by itself. So what we really want with leadership training is we want to try to break it into chunks to overcome cognitive overload. We want to space it over time. We want to make it collaborative. We want to support people on the job. And we want to be consistent because we want a consistent language of leadership in our businesses, but we need it to also simultaneously be relevant, right? So how do I create consistency? How do I create relevance? They can sometimes be have an inherent tension between those two items. In fact, all 5 of these have conflicts. I want to put it in a classroom, so I want collaborative. But if I put it in a classroom, then I'm going to lose the spaced over time, and I'm going to lose the broken into chunks. But if I try to put it digitally on our LMS, then I might lose the collaborative, and I might lose the relevance, And so this is the challenge. This is the battle, and it's a battle that we have to solve because these skills, leadership skills, creative skills, problem-solving skills, these are the most important skills we're going to need outside of programming skills and working with algorithms, and that's why I'm calling this an opportunity, because currently there is new technologies, new design approaches out there that enable us to go beyond just relying on one modality or another, just classroom or just e-learning or just micro-learning. There are opportunities now to make it work, and this is really the crux of how we make our learning more effective. How we go from box ticking to being more effective is to lean into the science, right, that we know supports learning, and choose a blend of modalities. So there are our first 2 lessons. We know the science supports a different approach, and that if we're going to be effective, we need to choose a blend of modalities, because you guys told me in those Menti polls that, for example, something like leadership training, it's not adequate because we're missing out on key dimensions of learning that overcome the learning challenges we have in our brain. So what's the next step? How do we then bridge these gaps? Well, start to talk about technology and design. And so one of the big frustrations I have, I guess you could say, in the learning world is when I see our customers making technology decisions and the way that those technologies are being presented to them. So, here's a bunch of different technologies that might be out there, right? You might have learning experience platforms. You might have an LMS. Most of us have an LMS. You might have an HRIS, an HR information system. That might be a part of your LMS. You might have some sort of MOOC content library. There might be some authoring tools. These days, there's an emergence of talent and skills ontology platforms. So we're talking AI talent and skills platforms. Live training is, of course, a part of it. And what's happening is I'm sitting down in front of a technology provider, like Cornerstone is sitting in front of me, or Degreed is sitting in front of me, or LinkedIn Learning is sitting in front of me. And they're all great. This is not me slighting you, right? But the problem is when I ask as a user, hey, how do you drive relevance? Can you be social? Can you help me learn in the flow of work? Can you do this? Can you do that? All those things that we should be asking. The answer is always, yes, we can do that. Yes, we can do that. Yes, we can do that. But the truth is, most technologies are very good at a core set of elements. So an LMS is very, very good at compliance of learning, tracking learning, reporting of learning, scheduling learning, management of learning. It is not good at social learning, even though many LMSs these days will say they're social because they have a chat window, right? But social is not the same thing, right? There's different versions of social. Or you might need an LXP, right? A learning experience platform. Some are very good at micro-learning and learning in the flow of work. Some are very, very good at creating classes and cohorts that can learn together, but over time digitally. Different technologies have different use cases. And so when I see our customers looking to use my Lord of the Rings reference, one ring to rule them all, they're looking for that one technology to do everything. It's incredibly frustrating because I know that it's not going to get them there. And so where we need to head as an organization, as an L&D organization, is we need to look at the appification of learning, right? In that there's going to be different technologies put together. A technology stack is another way that it's referred to, right? To give us what we need. And ideally, we want to pick technologies that we can turn on and off, that we're only paying for when we use them. And so here's like an example of what one might look like, right? So I might have PeopleFluent might be good enough to be my LMS and my talent platform and my HRIS. Then I might have LinkedIn Learning because I want a content library. But LinkedIn Learning is not that effective because it's hard to curate that learning. So I might need Degreed to help me curate both LinkedIn Learning, my e-learnings, and other learnings. But then I still have cohort-driven training. I still have classes coming together. But I've got 30,000 employees, or I've got 10,000 employees. I've got 1,000 employees spread across Australia. How can I bring them together without travel costs? Well, I need a digital platform that can do that, such as maybe Intrepid is a very good cohort, digital spaced cohort-driven platform. But Intrepid's not a good LMS. It can't replace PeopleFluent. Oh, and I'm a mining company, or I'm an automotive company, and I've got staff out in the field in remote locations. I need an LXP that can give them learning around safety and products and whatever it may be. AdApp's a good one for that. So I'm not selling these platforms, but I'm just talking about, if we're going to solve the learning challenges that we spoke about earlier about creating multiple modality learning that might be across different technologies, we need to start thinking about picking the right technologies that actually do it. But really what ends up happening is a lot of clients think, oh, if I go and invest in X technology or Y technology, I might end up with no one coming there, right? Like the LinkedIn Learning story of an underutilized learning platform. Or I might spend a lot of money and I might miss the mark, right? This is kind of where a lot of fear is around technology, and why I get so frustrated when technology providers present themselves as all things to all people. So we've got to know, that the science says that we've got to do learning differently. Irrespective of technology, going back 30 years to today, the science has always been the same on learning. And we need to be able to pick different modalities. But if we're going to be able to blend those modalities together, we've got to be careful with our technology decisions. Really look carefully at what technology is out there and how we can use it. And so that might require us to pick a technology stack. But then you're going to be maybe wondering, gosh, I'm worried about these three things: that no one comes, that I spend a lot of money on it, and that it isn't actually achieving the goal we want. Well, this is where your mindset and your processes and your design approach come in, right? We built all this micro learning and people aren't clicking on it, or people aren't completing it, or it's not actually having the learning impact. For this one, I want to lean on a quote from Einstein, one of my favorite quotes. We cannot solve our problems with the same thinking we used when we created them. So new technologies require new approaches. If I do something new and I go and grab an Intrepid type platform, or I grab a new AI driven platform, and I use my former thinking of traditional learning, classroom, and my old way of thinking, I'm going to get unpredictable and unsatisfactory results. So if we're really going to pivot and make the most of these new learning technologies, blend modalities together, get better results, we need to also elevate and shift our thinking. So what is traditional thinking? Well, as a vendor, right, as a partner who's coming in and solving learning challenges and getting presented, I would describe it something like this. Most of my interactions, whether it's Ben, we would like to deploy some new learning technology. What could it be? Or we want to train this group of people in XYZ topic. There's this starting point. And it normally starts off with, the company's invested in creating some competencies, or they've gone and done some training needs analysis. And they've already kind of decided what the content is. We need to train negotiation skills. I need to train these 5 things to my leaders, right? The work's already been done. It might be right. It might be half right. It might be completely wrong, but the work has been done. And they've already decided who the audience is. Often already the technology's been determined. Hey, we need it. Let me change technology to modality. We need it done in a classroom. We need it done via e-learning, right? And then the budget's set. And then what happens is, based on that, learners, experience the training, and maybe we measure it and hopefully we're successful, right? I'd say this is the most common way that learning has been handled, at least between, in the design phases, that initial planning, and then we go and build it, or we go and acquire it from the marketplace and we roll it out. But there's a big gap here, right? We kind of hope that things are working out. And to be perfectly frank, in a world where we want to not just learn when things are new, right? We also want to support people when they're applying it, when they're solving it, when things change. We want to support them on the job. We want to blend modalities together, right? Remember, we want to make sure these modalities come together in a world where we don't want learners to, treat our learning like a salad where they pick and choose they want and ignore the rest, where they treat the learning, their mindset is like, this is a blend. It's better when I drink it all together. Where learning is self-led, where learning is continuous, where learning is maybe microtized, where learning is spaced over time. In this world of learning, a mindset shift is required. What is that mindset shift? Well, number one, and this is, something that you guys will have seen me present before if you've been in our webinars, you need to have your critical design criteria in place. Number one, it's got to be ruthlessly relevant. If I take my leadership training and I move it out of a classroom and I break it over time and I space it out over 3 months, remember, those leaders are super busy. If the content that they're seeing and the why of the program, the framing of why they should even participate in the program is not ruthlessly relevant and urgent, they will not participate. So you might pick the perfect technology. You might, pick the perfect blend of modalities, but you miss the ruthless relevance mark. This is why micro-learning can fail. Or this is why, LinkedIn Learning, to be honest, struggles so much. It actually does a lot of things right, or Go1, or Coursera, or whatever it may be. They get a lot right. But what they miss is the ruthless relevance, because this is generic content. Yeah, okay, I can watch a video on how to present, or a series of videos. But where is the video on how to present complex data and numbers virtually to customers in Indonesia? Where is my ruthless relevance, right? Or the big thing that's also missing is why. Remember, learners only choose to learn when it's relevant and interesting. So to even get someone to log in and click on LinkedIn Learning and search for something, they first need to have some urgency driver. And often L&D's job is to create that urgency driver, to let people know, because most people think they're great. Most people don't think they have a problem. So why on earth would they look to solve something that doesn't exist in their mind? It's a big challenge with leadership. A lot of leaders come in thinking, why am I here? I've had leadership training before. I'm already good. Well, you know what? We're living in a disrupted world, and your employees' skills may not be relevant in 5 years. So are you creating an environment that creates an agile workforce? Okay, well, that's why you're here, to learn how to create an agile learning team environment. Oh, okay, I see the relevance now. I'm going to participate. We've got to create connections. And we've already said social. So yes, connections to people. But beyond that, we also need connections to the content, that it's got to be powerful and build connections to me, and the narrative has to be strong. Connections to leaders, connections to experts. How can I create, and again, using this leadership training as a reference, how can I create connections across this 3-month journey? So I got to be relevant. I got to create connections. I got to respect time. People are busy. Another challenge with some content that we create, whether it's a 2-day classroom or a 4-hour LinkedIn Learning course or a 60-minute e-learning, is that people don't have time. And so if I am going to go all the way back in time, to where we started, and try to create this experience, right, that's broken into chunks, this leadership training, it's spaced over time, it's collaborative, it's supported on the job, it's consistent yet relevant, then I better make sure that I am being relevant, I'm creating connections, I'm respecting time. Because if I get those first 3 things right, then I've ticked the first most important boxes of the next one, which is generating pull. If it's not relevant, if there's no connections, if it doesn't respect my time, nothing's going to pull me into this journey. And by pull, I want you to think of social media. I want you to think of what pulls you to open up YouTube on a weekend when you want to go and make something you've never made before, and that you just do it. No, you didn't get a notification from your company's LMS saying, complete this training on baking a cheesecake. No, you did it because you wanted to. Why? Because you know YouTube is a good source. It's a trusted source. You know it can be short and quick. You know it's something that's urgent and important for you because you've got to make it. And so what is the corporate training version of generating pull? And I'll tell you the first three is relevant, connections, and time. But then beyond that, it's gamification, it's competition, it's all sorts of different layers that can help generate pull. And then what I want to do is I want to collect data. I want to make sure that I'm actually, what I did in my design phase, when I did that analysis about what would be relevant, what type of connections are needed, how much time do people have, I've made some assumptions about how I'm going to generate pull, that I'm collecting data to make sure all this is working. And so if I'm kind of chip away here at where we started at, our starting point of competencies, doing some sort of training needs analysis, coming up with the content, already picking the modality. Now, if we realize I need to kind of drive relevance, I need to create connections, we start to see what's missing in the question mark. And the thing that's missing in the question mark is the learners. So what do I mean when I talk about the learners? Well, basically, yeah, I might still have the same starting point, but now I need to fill it up with some additional questions. What are the fears and motivators of the learners? How do we promote and drive urgency? How do we engage them and keep them coming back? What problems are we helping them solve? How much time do they have? How do we ensure the learning sticks? How do I gain buy-in? How do we measure success? If we're asking these questions, we start to fill in that gap. So I want to not just have my starting ideas, I want to find out what learners care about. I want to find out what their learning preferences and priorities are. I want to find out what the organization situation is. What are the goals of the organization? What's its current level of culture? Some organizations, have never done anything like this before. So we've got to build in a change management layer to a learning program that maybe I wouldn't have thought of had I not done this analysis. And then once I've done what learners care about, the preferences and priorities, and the organizational goal and context, I'm now ready to define what is the content. I'm now ready to define what are the right modalities. I'm now ready to define how much time should it be. Right? Maybe the answer is classroom training is perfect. Great. You've made a great outcome there. Maybe we need some classroom training, but I also need to space it over time, and I need some social collaborative thing. So what's the right technology to make that happen? Maybe you thought the content was going to be negotiation skills, but actually later you realized it was influence that was the issue. So the content's going to change. And so really what we're moving from is a content-centric, attendance-centric, it's delivered by someone-centric, tracking my learning hours-centric, to a learner-centric approach, to an engagement-centric approach, to a self-directed rather than delivered approach, and to a continuous learning rather than ticking off my minimum 3 hours of learning approach. So if we're going to make this learning work, we need all of these key lessons to be in place, right? Recognize, first of all, that this isn't just some modern technology thing chasing the shiny thing. The foundational science of how we learn supports a different approach. It supports blending modalities, using different modalities, kind of horses for courses, picking the right modality for the right learning outcome. You're going to need some technology, but be careful with the technology, because technology can help you blend modalities together in ways that simply weren't possible. 15 years ago, when I ran a 4-day classroom training, split between like 2 days and then 1 month later another 2 days, I had no way to link those 2 days together 15 years ago. I had no way to make sure people were deploying their actions. I had no way to keep that cohort connected. I had no way to give them learning support and to hear how they're going without expensive coaching. Now, like Intrepid or other technologies are out there where I can now connect videos, I can connect classroom training, I can connect social, I can connect on-the-job application into one experience, right? That didn't exist before. Now it does. But you got to be careful, because not all technologies really do everything in the way they say they do. And if I'm going to use technologies, I got to change my approach. I can't start off with a content and modality first mindset. I can't assume that I've got the right content, and I can't assume that it's the right modality. I've got to first think about my learners. I got to think about the environment they're operating in. I got to think about the business situation and the environment the business is operating in. And then once I put all that together, I can make great decisions about technology. And that's the mindset. When I talk about new approaches requiring new mindsets, it's It's a learner-centric approach that we're really striving for. And the big one at the end here, ultimately what this culminates in is before content was king, now engagement is king. If I am going to have learning be spaced over time, if I am going to have learning be continuous, if I'm going to be deploying different modalities and different technologies within my L&D organization, well, I better have some pretty amazing solutions for engagement, because one of the big frustrations for people is people don't turn up. People aren't clicking. People aren't working on it. And so I could do a whole nother webinar on engagement tools. In fact, maybe that'll be the next topic. But we've got to build in engagement to our design from the very beginning. And engagement starts with relevance, respecting time, and creating connections. They're the foundational elements. Beyond that, gamification, points, all those other pieces, they can come secondarily. So guys, I wanted to finish in time to give it some window for questions, which as I think where we're at. So I'm going to pause here for a moment and see if you guys have any questions. So you can type questions in the chat. I don't know if we're allowed to unmute, but we've already got a question here from Ashish. How would mentoring and or coaching fit in to make learning relevant and making it stick? So if I come back to that modalities slide, and guys, just feel free to keep the questions in. I'll address as many as I can. Right? Coaching is one of these modalities here. Right? It's represented by the two people sitting together with the clock, right, on the right-hand side here. So coaching is super powerful. Coaching can exist with no other modality as a powerful tool of learning if it's done correctly. Coaching can be a great glue. Once I've learned something new, coaching can be there to support me as I try to apply and take action on the job. But you got to have the right coach. The coach has to have the right amount of time, and the learner has to have the right amount of time. So the challenge of coaching isn't where would you put it? You'd put it, you can, if coaching is the right fit to help a senior leader who's individually struggling on some unique challenges, coaching may be all that they need. Not training, not anything else. It's just coaching. Or maybe coaching's there for support. The big factor there is more going to be budget. Is there a way to create the outcomes of coaching without coaching? For example, we're often running leadership training to thousands of learners with cohorts of 100 or 200. So what we do is we use a platform that enables learners to ask questions and to post videos where coaches can respond to them and give them feedback digitally, right? So that's a scalable version of coaching. So it's a complex question there, but I would think coaching is best as a support tool, or when there's a unique individual challenge that is not training related, it's more attitude related. So there's my short answer, Ashish. So AM has said, nothing more powerful than shaping the mindset of people wanting to learn. Yeah, mindset is really critical. A lot of when we're deploying complex or modern learning initiatives that might be a blend of modalities, honestly, all the pre-communication, the emails, we even record videos, most of the time is spent on changing people's mindsets. So mindset is king. I'd say mindset comes before skills, right? Without the right mindset, you can teach people until you're blue in the face, but a bit like you can lead a horse to the water, but you can't make it drink. So mindset helps them drink. And no worries if you've got to drop off. I know we're at the top of the hour. Aditi has asked, what role does pre and post assessment play in design and relevance? So it depends what you mean by pre and post assessment. So we use design thinking, or Addy has the analysis tool. So we're always doing analysis. So I would suggest that it's not that whether or not pre or post should occur. It's that analysis, it's changing what you're analyzing. But pre and post I find to be very effective tool for measurement, right? If I'm running a course on, say, delegation skills or on some special safety training, I want to do a pre-assessment that assess current competence, and then I want to do a post-assessment to assess post-competence. I don't necessarily treat it as a learning tool, but more of a measurement tool. But if you mean pre and post-assessment from an analysis and design standpoint, my answer is include more in your assessment than just what is the skill gap. Go beyond that. Okay, cool. So guys, that's really it for today's webinar. I think Tim and Zach, we wanted to finish with one other piece.
Oh,
some sort of poll.
So
Should I stop sharing?
Oh, you don't have to,
Oh,
Ben,
it's
'cause
already
the
up.
post
Great.
just popped up. So thank you, everyone. And well, Ben, thank you very much as well for sharing, these approaches and design methodologies that we can take to actually just do more, with our organizational learning. For everyone who's attended, we're really glad to have you here. The post just popped us. If you're interested in finding out more about our modern learning approaches or our wider range of learning solutions, just hit that yes on that contact us button and we'll be in touch.
Yeah, I actually run sessions like this, but very tailored for some of our customers, their L&D teams to engage them in some of these topics. So I'm very happy to offer that to you guys if that's something that's interesting. No worries, Ali. Thanks, Kelly. Thanks, Ashish. Thanks, Kathleen.
If not, thank you very much, everyone. We're glad to have you on. Hit that poll and have a great rest of the week ahead.
This webinar was brought to you by GP Strategies. Together, we help organizations transform through their people. You can access more webinars or download additional resources by visiting the GP Strategies Resource Library. The link is on your screen and in the description.